Ah, yes, we all want more downloads, don't we? Of course we do. Because it's the only thing that we can log on and look at. It's the only way that we can possibly measure our podcasting success, right? Wrong. Yeah, I think you knew I was going to say that. Today, I'm going to look at the foundations of a fanatical podcast audience right here on the Podcast Accelerator, the thrice weekly show that brings you podcast education, industry insights, and straight talking reactions to podcasting news. I'm your host, Mark Asquith, that bloody British podcast guy and CEO and co-founder here at Rebel Base Media, the podcast tech company that creates the Podcast Success Academy, podcast websites, Productivity, Rebel Base Studios, and Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host where you can start and host multiple podcasts for one simple price and transfer an existing podcast in completely for free. So go ahead and start your 7-day free trial now at Captivate.fm. So, like I said, we all want more listeners, but do we truly understand what separates a true listener from a casual lurker? By digging a little bit deeper into this, we can learn what it takes to build true fans amongst our listener base. And that's what I'm going to dig into in about 15 seconds, right after I give a shout out to the team at Aweber, who still every day help me to generate revenue and relationships from my audience. I get a lot of emails through, and guess what? A lot of those emails are responses to the emails that I send from Aweber saying there's a new podcast episode. And sure enough, people ask me questions, I build relationships, and I'll be meeting a few of the people who have emailed me out at Podcast Movement for a coffee. That's the kind of relationship you can build through emailing, okay? So if you're not engaging with your audience through email, go and check Aweber out for 90 days, totally free at markasquith.com/Aweber. So, you want more downloads. I get it. You want more downloads because it's the only thing that we can log on and print out. It's the only thing that we can log on and check. It's the only thing that we can give to sponsors. It's the only thing that we can give to ourselves to say that our show is doing well. But actually, do we have an audience if we've got downloads? Okay, well, let's analyse that. Yeah, sure, we've got an audience because someone is downloading the file and listening to the audio. But what does an audience really entail? Well, if you go to a live taping of a TV show, that's right, I said the word taping because it's definitely 1989. But if you go to a live taping of a TV show, the audience very often claps, gets involved, laughs. Now, what about if you go to a gig? It's not like the audience are just there doing nothing. It's not like they're not jumping up and down. You go to an old school Bon Jovi gig. It's not like they're bouncing on the feet. It's not like they are going absolutely crazy and singing along. Oh, wait a sec. No, it is. Of course it is, because that's what audiences do. They get involved. So is your podcast audience actually an audience or just a series of listeners that happen to download your show? And in particular, what separates the listeners and the lurkers from the fans, from the audience members, all right? Well, I believe there are certain things that you've got to cultivate when it comes to this. I believe there are certain things that you have to encourage, and I believe there are certain people that are always going to rise to the top when it comes to this. So I'm thinking here of my audience members. So I'm thinking of Kat Praisewater. I'm thinking of Candice, who emailed me this week all the way from Paris. I'm thinking of Kipper and Felicia and Annette Bone, who always drop me a line to say, do you know what? I found this episode useful. I'm talking about Liz Kovar, who emailed me this week. Stacey Gowers from NPR, who emailed me this week. All fans and audience members. And now, friends. People that I'm going to be meeting at Podcast Movement and at various other places for a coffee. Okay? They are fans. They are audience members that get in touch. And how do we cultivate that? How do we step beyond the download? Well, we need to be inviting people, but the real key with this is that you can't just say things like, email me your questions. And I know I do that and it works, but you can't keep saying that. You can't just have that. You've got to start to get contextual with people. As a real example of that, last week, Arnie emailed me saying, how do I deal with a podcast conference? It's my first time. Well, I recorded an episode for Arnie this week. Monday's episode 39, was talking about how Arnie in particular can handle Podcast Movement. And you see what I've done there is I've encouraged people to get in touch with me and ask questions, but then I've brought them into the fold. So I've said I've not said this is just a random question or it like made out that it's me that's come up with the idea to talk about this thing. No, I've said, look, Arnie has emailed. Arnie, I'm answering this for you. And throughout that episode, I addressed Arnie. All right? But the other thing that you've got to do, which a lot of podcast hosts don't do because it's difficult and it's easy to be lazy and not do it, I reach out to an audience member at least once a week, okay? So I'll reach out to several people that I know listen to the show, and I'll just check in. On Twitter, I'll check in on Instagram, either via a DM or via a usual kind of conversation, via a story. I'll check in via email. I sent a care package out to one of my Podcast Accelerator mentees, one of the people that I do personal coaching with yesterday, just because he was having a bit of a rough week. His downloads had not gone up this week like they normally do. He was struggling a little bit with that. So we jumped on a Slack DM as normal. He's in my private Slack community. And we had a little chat through, and he's got a little surprise coming in the mail. You know, it's that kind of thing that you can do. Now, one thing that I think you can do that's very, very low-hanging fruit, right? Everyone can afford to do this. Get some stickers printed. Get some stickers printed with your details on. So I'm talking like your cover art for your podcast. Even better than that, podcast cover art is not amazing for stickers, but it's a decent worst case. Even better than that, get your logo on there or a hashtag, or create something that is a well-designed thing that people can stick on their laptops and so on. And then, when you know that someone has tweeted you or listened to the show, DM them, grab their address, and send them a handwritten thank you with a couple of stickers in there. All right? It's tiny. It's a tiny little thing. We do that with Spark of Rebellion, but we only do it for patrons. But I do it with my other stuff, Captivate, Rebel Base Media, Podcast Success Academy, Podcast Rebellion, podcast websites, productivity. I do that for those brands every single day. And I'll just reach out. And what a nice surprise it is for someone to have emailed me just to say, it's really nice that you've done this episode. And me to email back saying, that's amazing. I really appreciate you. Send me your address over. I'm going to stick you something in the mail. That is what separates a fan from a listener, from a lurker, because you have a relationship with them, all right? A fan feels like they are on the inner circle. A fan feels like they know things that other people don't. That is how you can start to cultivate them. There are so many other little mini tactics that you can use for this, but the point that I want to get across is that someone who is a fan and who is at the top level of advocacy of your brand. I'm talking the top 3, 5, maybe 7, 10% of people who are in your audience that will shout and scream about you to everyone else. Advocates. Those guys, you need to make them feel like they're on the inside, and you need to give them something special. That is the cornerstone. It's the backbone of a fanatical podcast audience, all right? So start to throw some ideas around. If you need anything, just hit me up at Mr. Asquith on Twitter. Email me. If you get my emails, go ahead and subscribe. If you don't get the emails, go to markasquith.com, go and subscribe. I'll send you updates on the show. I'm going to let you know when I release new episodes, and you can just hit reply to those emails. And I respond to every single one. Yes, I've got a VA, Sam, she's fantastic, but Sam just marks them and says, Marco, you've got a new email from someone that listens to the show. And I reply to those, all right? So, try it. Let me know what you need. You've got my details. And thank you, as always, for joining me here on the Podcast Accelerator. Remember to tell your podcasting friends that the show is available to listen to for free in any app that supports podcasts. And if you're wondering what the best next step to take for your own podcast is, whether you're a new or a veteran podcaster, go ahead and take our short 5-minute survey where I'm going to help you to diagnose and solve the main issue holding your show and your podcast back. And I'm going to give you access to our free Podcast Rebellion community, plus a load of other swag, a load of other goodies, a load of other insider-only content, okay? Go and get all of that and go and find out what's holding your podcast back at rebelbasemedia.io/grow. And until the next time, don't forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel.